So a few days ago, I took along my friend Dave for a ride in the Bearhawk. Now, Dave's got quite a lot of Bearhawk time in his own aircraft. He's also a flying instructor, and we went out flying for the morning into the back country and explored a few airstrips. So this was the first time that I'd had anyone along in my own aircraft with a significant amount of Bearhawk flying experience, and that was invaluable. One of the things that we'd wanted to do was fly into some of the sloping airstrips, so we did start off with a couple of just level ground airstrips. This one here is flying into Lake Huron Station. It's a beautiful, wide, long, probably 600-700 metre airstrip. They run a homestead with bed and breakfast on their high country station. It's just a lovely part of the South Island. So we did a couple of takeoffs and landings in here. Dave was interested to see how my flying was coming along, and I was really keen to get any feedback from Dave that he had to offer. Once we'd done a little bit of flying on this airstrip, we then headed further up the valley. Here we are doing a runway inspection, albeit from several hundred feet, just to check that there's no stock or any other obstructions on the airstrip. It's actually quite a long airstrip, probably 400 metres long, I would guess. Not short at all, plenty wide enough and not even terribly rough. But it was the first time that I'd been on an airstrip with that much slope on it, so we took it easy, added a few knots onto the approach speed. Here we are lining up on it. One thing that did make a huge difference with all of these airstrips is now that I'm able to land on the main wheels and wheel it on and keep the tail wheel clear, it prevents transmitting the stresses and vibration through the airframe until a much lower speed. You can see here that the nose is just gently bouncing up the airstrip. But once the tail wheel touches down there, you can see the cowl bouncing away quite happily as the tail wheel bounces along the ground. I had to add quite a lot of power just to get up the airstrip, and almost made the rookie error of coming to a stop before Dave prompted me to feed in a bit of power. Of course, with a bit of slope like this, it's just like having a headwind on the runway. You get airborne quite quickly. So, these airstrips up here are reasonably long because they're probably used mainly for top-dressing aircraft carrying probably a ton or so of superphosphate. So they've got reasonable drop-off on them, and we're operating very lightweight, so not really too much of a challenge for an aircraft like the Bearhawk. So we're now heading across to the next one. The next one was very similar, a little bit steeper though, and a little bit rougher too. Once again, when we got there, we just flew along the length of the airstrip. I kept it out the left-hand side so I could take a look at it. That's it, just coming into view above the cowling there. And again, this one's plenty long enough. It wasn't quite as long as the first one. Probably 350, 400 metres, something like that. And because it's on a reasonable slope uphill, it's the equivalent of being even longer. The approaches were all relatively open. You weren't stuck down in a tight valley or anything like that. There it's just coming into view on the nose. Once again, just carrying probably another 5 or 10 knots of airspeed. And once I touched down and the speed was back to about 20 knots, adding some power in just to run up the airstrip. I landed a wee bit deeper on this one because it was quite rough at the start. And then you can see the tail wheel on the ground again, the cowling bouncing up and down. So just getting ready to depart from this sloping airstrip as well. Now between Dave and I, it's probably about 400 pounds in the front seat, something around 180 kilograms. We were carrying just over half tanks, I think 120 litres, that'd be about 30 gallons. Gave us a weight, all up weight of around 2,200 pounds, something like that. Not terribly heavy, we deliberately kept the weight down. Centre of gravity was probably back around 14 inches. So airborne out of there, we're now heading across one of the main rivers in the South Island here, and there's another sloping airstrip on the other side that we had permission to operate in on this day. And this particular airstrip is quite long, probably 700 metres long, quite wide, very smooth. It's got an air sock, and it's used by one of the local stations here. They accommodate hunters into the region. Now, a lot of these ones don't have a go-round, so you are committed pretty much from the time you're on the airstrip. And again, because this airstrip was quite long, you know, you touch down and within 100 metres or so, or even less, you're well back to taxi speed, so we were adding power to carry on up this trip. So here we're going back into one of the earlier strips that we'd flown into. We had to fly past it on the way back anyway, so we thought, why not? Why not give it another crack? Once again, just carrying an extra few knots, and it was starting to feel quite comfortable actually. So a couple of days later, I was back in the mountains with my friend Jonathan, and it was a little bit windy further into the mountains, so we just played around on a gravel bar here and landed and just admired the view for 30 minutes. Yeah, we just